Hello, I honestly don't know if we're live because my PC's updating and that typically tells me because my PS is quite delayed in the transmission, but I've clicked the live button, so I'm going to say that we are. However, a little rundown of what this is. This is the F1 Manager Sim League for Cryptic Racing League as a little side project here today. As earlier this week you did have round 1 at Austria, and in a matter of moments time we will be going underway for the British Grand Prix sprint race, which will be a 2-part event. First part will be... Sorry, I've lost track of all my words. First part will be your sprint. Second part, we will sit back a bit. I'm going to post the results into the channel, so you're going to have about a 5-minute intermission. Then we have qualifying, which you'll just get to see a straight up simulation for, as I also take it as a bit of a rest. And then we will be back at it with the main event. So the event should take about an hour and 15 minutes, so do not go anywhere as there's plenty of action to come. But first of all, it's the sprint race on the grid. It is Sebastian Vettel who lines up on pole with Charles Leclerc in second place. Isaac Hadjar starts from third with Michael Schumacher just behind him fourth. He had a fairly poor event in Austria, ended up 2 whole laps down. It really did not pan out his way whatsoever. Besides that, P5 Oscar Piastri, 6th is Ayrton Senna's, with 7th being Nigel Mansell, 8th Lewis Hamilton, 9th George Russell, and 10th belonging to Lando Norris, a place higher than where he started in Austria. Again, another driver who had a fairly rough event, retiring on the first lap. In 11th is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who is alongside his teammate of Paul Aron with Niki Lauda. 13th, Gabriel Bortoleto and Behrman in the Mercedes, lining up 14th and 15th here. Nico Hulkenberg starts from 16th with Verstappen, the man who won your season opener, starting down in 17th. Nico Rosberg, second event in a row being in that bottom 4. He came 17th in the main race. He's 18th for the sprint race start. Alex Palou starts from 19th, and Alan Prost, another driver who got caught up in the first lap conundrum in Austria, starting at the very back. So we will get straight into it, ladies and gents, as I'm going to quickly pause it to give you as much of the start procedure as possible whilst I retire these cars, so they don't take too much of an impact amongst the other drivers on the grid who are being simulated, because this separate team is going to be ran no management whatsoever. As now we can also shimmy ourselves to the front, and it is a lights out and away we go here. Vettel gets off well. Hadjar up to second, immediately getting past Charles Leclerc in the Alpine. As you can see, it's been rather streamlined. Ayrton Senna wheel to wheel with Oscar Piastri, trying to get the Sauber up into the top 5. They managed to come home 6th and 8th in Austria. They're currently 7th and 8th to kickstart this sprint event. Not a bad start whatsoever for the green team. However, but they will be definitely looking for more than that over the next 17 laps of sprint race action here at Silverstone. Schumacher poised behind Charles Leclerc. Will the Racing Bulls try and disrupt the flow a bit? Because Hamilton is also in P6. He's the man who could take the championship lead after this sprint race if it all goes his way. But for Sebastian Vettel, fastest lap early on, able to just shimmy that car away from the rest of the field Isaac Hadjar tucked in behind in second place with Charles Leclerc in third. He will use the DRS to its full advantage, even look for a move into Brooklands. Unable to do so this time round. He now follows up in the slipstream up towards Copse Corner. Can the Alpine get by anytime soon? It doesn't look so. They've not been the strongest of cars this season after round one. In fact, they had the worst net finish besides Aston Martin, as you could see there for a very vague moment. Hadjar having a little look at a move against Sebastian Vettel. Red Bull led every lap but 3 in Austria, and now they take the lead here at Silverstone. Instead of Verstappen, it's Isaac Hadjar who leads. The same man who started on pole in round one managed to come home P11 with it in the end, showing how vulnerable these guys are, especially when they are at the front. It's so easy to work your way down the field, but Sebastian Vettel fending off for dear life against the Frenchman, the German, knowing what has to be done. He looked like he was one of the favourites for this championship entering the season, fighting in for the lead of this sprint race. As you can also see a bit further back is Hamilton, Senna, Leclerc, Piastri, Mansell and Norris all having a little bit of a duel between them. But we are now lap 4 of 17. The laps ticking away quite quickly in this sprint event at Silverstone. A magnificent circuit for racing, and it is definitely proving that today, as everyone is impeccably close to one another, not giving anyone an inch of room. But whilst this race does burn down, these drivers are getting closer and closer. Isaac Hadjar having a little look to the inside. Instead, Michael Schumacher around the outside for the Vale chicane against Charles Leclerc. That's the Racing Bulls up into P3. He looks like he could finally start his point scoring tally this season with a sprint race podium at Silverstone, unless someone behind him could snatch that away from him in the next 12.5 laps, as there's Hamilton making a move on Ayrton Senna. Both Racing Bulls racing around this track and working their way up the pecking order. It really is not looking convincing for Red Bull whatsoever. They're leading the championship by 7 points after round one. These points here today should, by my calculations, drop it to about 2 points, as Isaac Hadjar did try and get Vettel, failed to do so, and now that leaves Michael Schumacher all over the gearbox of the Red Bull. Can the junior team as such take the lead in this title fight so early on? It's of course round 2 of 16, so anything can happen, as Hadjar has finally got back past Sebastian Vettel. Looks like the Red Bull just has to hold on to it for the time being, otherwise it could be a different story. Vettel look to the outside through Copse, and now Schumacher pounces on the exit of Copse Corner, doesn't manage to finalise it through Magus and Beckett's, as the Alpine of Charles Leclerc even tries to go for a lunge. Hadjar drops behind Vettel and Schumacher in one foul swoop, got caught off guard into Stowe by the German who came flying through, and then the other German came flying through, and towards Farman Abbey is going to be a swap of the Germans. Up front, it's Michael Schumacher who now edges ahead of Sebastian Vettel, but Vettel will use the DRS to full impact and put that Haas back up into the lead of this race. Superb racing between these two as they go towards Copse Corner. Schumacher looked to the inside, tried forcing a gap, didn't manage to do so, and a lap ago he was wheel to wheel with Vettel through the S's, or Magus and Beckett's as we know them. This time didn't manage to do the same thing, as Vettel now has a bit of a lead in this race to try and hold on to. As you can see, 10 laps to go and no one has got over a second of a margin to the other guy, with Paul Aron and Andrea Kimi Antonelli going wheel to wheel for P11. We also had Gabriel Bortoletto and Niki Lauda going wheel to wheel. Verstappen right in behind. He's getting absolutely nowhere in this sprint race, and for the main race he will just be leading the championship by 2 sole points over, I believe, both Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton. So it really is not going his way here today. But Michael Schumacher's got past Vettel, and Hadjar even slots that Haas car into the race lead. Not race lead, into third place. As again, laps just disintegrating, corners going one by one as everyone's so insanely close to each other. No one still able to break out of the DRS margin from the car ahead or even car behind. It is so insanely compact in this field. However, Alex Palou may have just done that, dropping to 1.0 against Hulkenberg. He's not going to have DRS up towards Stowe Corner, but for the first 9 laps or so, we've managed to have everyone in their own respective battles. I do think Palou is saving tyres. He's on the mediums, everyone else around him on the softs. Palou, in fact, the only driver on a set of mediums in this sprint race. And now it is starting to take a bit of a toll. He's burned them up in the first half and gets overtaken by Alain Prost, who is up into P18 now for the Alpine team. After this sprint race, it will just be No, it won't even just be Alpine. Everyone would have taken home a point this season in just the main race and the sprint race. I personally think that is amazing stuff to look at. Sets us up for such an interesting season because every single manufacturer tightly compact, as Isaac Hadjar trying to work a way past the Racing Bulls of Michael Schumacher, whilst Lewis Hamilton is stuck behind Charles Leclerc. He's going to use some DRS as there's a yellow flag being waved. I believe that's Paul Aaron. Yes, it was. He ran wide in the loop and forfeited him a place or two. Hamilton, though, has got ahead of the Alpine and is now completely set free to try and charge on to this group of cars. Vettel 2 tenths behind Isaac Hadjar. No move made there, but Ayrton Senna to the inside against Charles Leclerc. That's P5 for the Aston Martin driver. Looked rather easy, as this is where the field starts to separate a bit in this sprint race. Antonelli getting back past Oliver Behrman and got about 1.5 seconds to try and pursue after Lando Norris in this race, who's only sitting P10. Won't be enough for points. That points place is occupied by George Russell. Piastri wheel to wheel with Leclerc, the Alpine walking that car backwards down the pecking order. They were only P4 about 3 laps ago. Now they are holding on to 2 points. Can they survive a while longer, being put under pressure by the Brit of George Russell, who had an amazing drive out in Austria, 17th up to 4th, giving Ferrari all their points this season so far, whilst Nico Rosberg struggling down in P19 after this sprint race. It's been so difficult for cars to work their way through the field, as proven with the man leading the championship after the opener being stuck in P16 still. No one has let him by that easily, which clearly pictures how difficult and how tight the field is, as everyone trying to overtake one another. Piastri's got ahead of Ayrton Senna, but Senna's going to fight it back into the Vale Bank chicane, out of it and towards Club. Piastri holds on to the place. The Sauber driver giving the team absolutely everything, which is just what is needed with such little time left in the sprint race. Hence why it's less points to be brought home from the sprint as well. Vettel, you're so close to getting back past Hadjar. Hadjar 2 tenths or a quarter of a second behind Schumacher as he goes over the detection zone, drops to about 4 tenths back. You want to be about 3 back for a proper opportunity, as Vettel tried going for it against Hadjar. Hadjar shut the door and Hamilton went gliding through in the Racing Bulls. Both Racing Bulls into the podium places here for the sprint race. It will mean the team at the top of the constructors table will be inverted after this race, as it will be Lewis Hamilton who grants Racing Bulls an extra 6 points to their name. They'll be coming home from this sprint with 14 compared to Red Bull's 7, which by my calculations should put them level with the Red Bull team for the main event, and it will be a question as to who can score more points. Hadjar overtaking Schumacher to try and minimise the damage, give them a 1 point advantage into the feature race, and Schumacher will almost indefinitely have none of it with 2 laps to go now. The Racing Bulls right behind the Red Bull. Can the Frenchman redeem himself after a lacklustre Austrian GP? Started on pole, finished outside the points due to driving of his own fault, had a collision with Senna, got a penalty. That penalty granted Gabriel Bortoleto a point in that opener. And Hadjar definitely redeeming himself with a drive that could be worthy of a champion in this sprint race. Schumacher very nearly had a poke at the Red Bull. 1 lap left to go, 7 tenths up the front of the pecking order. As if you can't tell, Antonelli really has broken up this field. He's just holding everyone up in P11, so the top 10 is confirmed, but Bortoleto and Verstappen go dancing through the loop. Nothing can be done there for the Red Bull. He'll go around the outside in Brooklands and still has to sit behind Gabriel Bortoleto. Whatever he does, it will mean nothing for that Red Bull team, as this young Frenchman has one more spot to properly defend against Schumacher, who will go around the outside, will get the move done. The Frenchman yields the place at the very end, but Vettel versus Hamilton as Schumacher wins the sprint. Hamilton by 85 thousandths will be ahead of Sebastian Vettel, who will have to settle for 4th, Piastri in 5th, Senna 6th, Russell in 7th, and Leclerc holding on to a prized P8. And that is the sprint race over and done with. Michael Schumacher winning it from 4th on the grid. Isaac Hadjar coming home P2, with Lewis Hamilton finding 5 places to come home P3, with Sebastian Vettel, the man on pole, dropping to 4th. No one who has started from pole has won thus far this season. Yes, there's only been two races, 1 sprint, 1 main, but that is definitely something to consider. Oscar Piastri comes home P5 with Ayrton Senna in P6. George Russell takes 7th as Leclerc comes home in 8th. That's the points. Outside the points, you do have Lando Norris, Nigel Mansell, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Oliver Bearman, Paul Aron, Niki Lauda, Max Verstappen, Gabriel Bortoleto, Alan Prost, Nico Rosberg, Nico Hulkenberg, and Alex Palou. So for the next few minutes, I will be quickly doing the results so we can get back underway for you in a few moments with qualifying. And now we are back for main race action here today. Qualifying up next. The question will be, who comes out on top at the end of this session? So we, of course, had the sprint that just passed over. And I'm just going to import the pole lap for that. And that was your sprint results. But up next, I manage it just in case someone does DNF in the course of qualifying. And yeah, ends up going behind us. So yeah, the clock burning down. Hamilton and Schumacher, the early birds in this session, with Verstappen walking his way around the track on an outlap. Hopefully he can set a clean flyer to put him up in amongst the front runners. Yes, he does, straight to pole position in qualifying here today. So much can be done by that Red Bull. Currently, Leclerc, Antonelli, Russell and Prost in the drop zone. Will that stay the way it is, or will it change up? With qualifying now coming to a close, Piastri gets out, Russell doesn't, however. Another event where George Russell can't make it into the second round. He started 19th in Austria, as I'm just going to quickly write down who went out. But yeah, an Alpine of Charles Leclerc, the man who started second in sprint quali, unable to get through in the first part of main qualifying, as Niki Lauda and Ayrton Senna also make a first session exit for them. This really just showing how unpredictable qualifying can be here in the F1 Manager. As Max Verstappen, the man who was unable to do anything in the sprint event, will be starting on pole, and for the second time this season, Sebastian Vettel ends up joining a Red Bull on the front row. He's in second, with Oscar Piastri in the Sauber doing superb with what he's been given. He's the only Sauber in the top 10, let alone the top 3 here, with Nico Rosberg starting to try and redeem himself in the Ferrari after poor Austrian GP. Starting 4th will mean everything for him. Lewis Hamilton, he finished P2 at Austria. He is starting from P5 in at Silverstone. In P6 is Isaac Hadjar, the man who just messed up at the final Beck and Cool in qualifying. Not qualifying, in the sprint, and yielded the win to the Racing Bulls of Michael Schumacher. Alex Palou starts from 7th, another name that did fairly poor in the sprint session, starting in P7 with Michael Schumacher tucked in alongside, and for the first time this season a Williams will be starting in the top 10. That's Paul Aaron, but alongside him another first time top 10 is Gabriel Bortoleto, a man who stole that final point from Isaac Hadjar out in the second race of the season, well, out in the first race, but in P11 is a best start as well. Yeah, a best start in a main race for Nigel Mansell. He starts from P11 in the Sauber, his teammate lining up from 3rd, of course. In 12th, though, is the man who started and finished P11 in the sprint race. It's Andrea Kimiantinelli. 13th, however, goes to Lando Norris in the Racing Bull in the Aston Martin outfit. So a fairly decent event for Aston so far. It's only got worse with the main event coming round, both of them starting in that bottom 7. Senna in 17th. However, for McLaren, they do have Nico Hülkenberg out qualifying Niki Lauda and starts from P14 with Oliver Bearman 15th and Alan Prost starting from 16th. In 17th is Ayrton Senna, 18th is Niki Lauda, 19th Leclerc, and 20th is George Russell. So now that is all done, we will be going to the main event relatively soon. As I'm just giving a little sigh, because CRL's car owner's fucking up all the roles. I'll be straight up, he's just gave someone a role for a division they aren't even taking part in. Besides that, of course, you've got your grid. There's been no altercations for this session, so we will go straight into the 52 lap race here at Silverstone. Again, retiring the whole whole driver lineup for this team, just for the sake of getting it all done easily. And now it's lights out and away we go. Verstappen versus Vettel towards turn 1. The Red Bull will lead away as the Haas has no response so far. Not many cars going wheel to wheel through the first few corners. They all are focused on keeping it clean, but Schumacher around the outside of Alex Palou. He said he's already had enough of it against the Haas and will just be poking that nose ahead through Luffield. Will get the place done for for Woodcote, as Paul Aaron even capitalising on a poor start from the Haasman, who is down to P9 so early on, whilst everyone up front has not shifted whatsoever, apart from Hamilton, who's made a move on Nico Rosberg. The Ferrari, though, still sitting comfortably in P5. Fastest lap after lap 1 goes to the Racing Bulls of Lewis Hamilton, who sits in P4. But Max Verstappen is the man to beat so far. He currently leads away, but Vettel to the inside, using the medium compounds to their full advantage. You would have thought the Red Bull on the softs would have had the upper hand, but no, the mediums prevailing so early on in this race, as it does set up a dynamic to come. Vettel's looks so strong all weekend long, almost like he is the man to beat, and Verstappen is giving him that challenge he deserves. It's 5 points in the top 3 after that sprint race. Vettel on 20, Hamilton on 24, and Verstappen on 25. So any change in position could very much change the outcome of that championship fight after this main race. In terms of the constructors though, Racing Bulls and Red Bull tied up on 32 as things stand, and Haas just sitting there on 22, missing out on all the fun and action so far. But hopefully with Vettel in second, about to be first, which will now be first, maybe second again as Verstappen goes to the inside for the Vale, as Vettel does confirm it will be first again, and Palau down in 9th. They could try and do a bit of recovery against the Racing Bulls and the Red Bulls. However, they do all have 2 drivers running into points, as there's Vettel being overtaken once more by the Flying Dutchman in the Red Bull. Straight through, no remorse, and easy pickings for him. As Verstappen fighting away with Sebastian Vettel. Vettel will get DRS as they work their way to Stowe corner, round the outside of Stowe, and makes Verstappen subside to second place. With it being so early on, we've already hit a 10th of the race distance, being lap 5 now, as everyone so impeccably close. It's a lot more opened up than the sprint race. In the sprint race, everyone was within a second of each other until about lap 10. But because everyone's on different starting tyres, that field opening up a bit quicker, and it will give more chance for drivers to work their way through the field, which we didn't really see in the sprint race. But we can already note Prost and Senna have made a place each, as there is Paul Aaron to the inside against Isaac Hadjar, up and through against the Red Bull, and that's P6 for the Williams driver, who is currently pointless so far this season, but giving Williams an absolute joyride. They probably didn't anticipate many points this season regarding with their lineup compared to the others, because let's be brutally honest, Hamilton and Schumacher are 2 names to beat. But Paul Aaron managing to go at it, as there's a yellow flag. Bortoletto giving us a little spin in to Brooklands, go straight round and has to wait for everyone to get back on before continuing with his journey. That's why the Mercedes are sitting stranded in 18th and 20th so far. But Paul Aaron has just overtaken Michael Schumacher to P5 now. The Williams absolutely loving those medium compounder tyres, whilst those on the softs definitely in some agony, as it really is unravelling to be a race where the soft compounds are not much of a race tyre, and very little can be done about it now. Starting on the softs, they're just being swallowed up by those on the mediums. You can see Paul Aaron still sitting in 6th place, whilst up in that fight for the top 4, Oscar Piastri at the very back of it, and Vettel at the front of it, running on mediums, whereas everyone else on the softs from my understanding. But Verstappen round the outside for Vale, and that is what gives the Red Bull the race lead once more. Isaac Hajar did have a little peek towards Farm against Paul Aaron. Didn't manage to poke that nose down the inside and force a move, whereas Vettel trying to do exactly that to the inside for Brooklands round the outside of Luffield did not manifest into a move that granted the German the race lead this early on. However, Lewis Hamilton all over the back. These three definitely look like they will be the ones fighting away for this championship. Vettel round the outside of Verstappen and again into the lead for the German driver, as this will be crucial in how this championship does unfold in the near future. We will be doing round 3 and 4 tomorrow and 2 on Sunday, so we'll be at round 5 come the end of this week. Verstappen versus Hamilton. Verstappen drops down to 3rd. With the way things are going, that top 3 will just flip on its head in the driver's standings, and everyone practically goes back to square one, but Hamilton making a move quite quickly on Vettel, which rewrites that narrative we just had, as Hamilton, a 32.3 in this race. He is setting blistering sectors in that Racing Bulls car. But one thing to say for certain, those Racing Bulls are loving life this season. They've had such a rocket ship of a car. It's just a shame that they haven't capitalised on it that much. Of course, round 1, it was a Red Bull dominated event with Verstappen cruising to success. Here today though at Silverstone, sprint win to Schumacher, and if things were to end how it is now, the race win even to Lewis Hamilton, as Mansell fending off Rosberg, who goes to the inside for the Valebank chicane, has to stay in P9 though, as it is all unravelling behind those two. Antonelli just leading a kerfuffle of cars, including Alex Palou, Lando Norris, Alan Prost, Ayrton Senna, Niki Lauda and Nico Hülkenberg. But for Palou's sake, to the inside against Antonelli, trying to finish it round the outside of Luffield, but the tighter line just proving to be quick enough to hold that place for Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the Italian, being put under all sorts of pressure here at Silverstone. Down the hangar straight now, up towards Stowe Corner. Lando Norris on the outside of Palou and Antonelli. That is 2 in 1 for the Brit, but Alan Prost also moving that Alpine up into P12. Brilliant stuff for the Frenchman, who is trying to drive for the sake of Alpine's championship here, but it really is not working out the way Prost would have hoped for here today. Sitting in P12, didn't have much of a qualifying run, and now doing all the recovery he can. He's worked it up to P12 thus far. It's been a okay start for that Alpine with 12 laps in, however, and you can even see Niki Lauda 2 moves on Antonelli and Palou there, but Antonelli and Palou still wheel to wheel. Palou will get ahead. Antonelli settles in as it's 3 wide there. Hülkenberg being sliced up and dropping behind George Russell as Gabriel Bortoleto making it the first stop of the day here at Silverstone. And this is Mercedes. They already know that this is not going to work out for them, so they're going to have to try and do something different to break free and give themselves the upper hand here at Silverstone. But Oliver Behrman sitting in P19, he's going to have to play the waiting game, be patient, and it will come to you as Max Verstappen into the pits. He's going to try and undercut the likes of Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton as well. But for the Dutchman, he is plummeting down that pecking order. Whereabouts will he come out? He will come out behind Oliver Behrman and Nico Hülkenberg, who go wheel to wheel through Farm and Abbey, but Behrman will finally make a move, and it is against the McLaren of Nico Hülkenberg, who is now down into P17, but Max Verstappen is just in the background ready to pursue for that lead. Whereas Hamilton and Schumacher may want to think about pitting soon to try and cover it off, because that threat of a Verstappen undercut is becoming quite likely, and when that does happen, it will be very difficult to catch that Red Bull back up. Antonelli into the pits for the Williams. He's dropping down the field. He's also trying to go early. Whereabouts will he come out compared to Lauda and Bortoletto is the main question. Is Leclerc getting past Ayrton Senna? The Aston Martin really struggling in the race trim, but Senna working their way towards Brooklands. Nothing coming for them this time round. Charles Leclerc sitting ever so pretty in P13, whilst George Russell to the inside against Alex Palou for Copse Corner, so close to making contact, but those two just being experienced and mature enough not to have collided. Sebastian Vettel now into the pit lane to react from Max Verstappen as Schumacher fending off Hadjar towards turn 1. The Frenchman doing absolutely everything he can now for Red Bull, all over the back of the Racing Bulls driver. They work their way down towards Brooklands. DRS wide open for Hadjar, doesn't make it work. Yellow flags being waved for a vague moment, and that's Gabriel Bortoletto, who's had a nightmare of a race so far. He's had spins, he had lockups, and now a spin again, I believe that was. But Hadjar still settled behind Michael Schumacher, very much unsettled to the inside for Stowe Corner, and he will charge on through and darts into the pit with Lewis Hamilton, who now is racing the likes of Verstappen in this race, who is tucked in behind Vettel, so the undercut on the Haasman did not work, as everyone taking a pit stop in this race now. Where does Vettel come out compared to Hamilton? He will be just ahead, and Max Verstappen all over the back of the Racing Bulls. It is kicking off here at Silverstone. Will Verstappen get past Hamilton? First time of asking. He looks to the inside. He won't be able to. That will probably be an opportunity blundered, and now he will have to settle behind Lewis Hamilton for the duration of this as they work their way through the queue. Oliver Behrman and George Russell so close. It's going to be Vettel and Hamilton wheel to wheel. Hamilton's gone past all of them in one swoop, and Vettel's even been done by Max Verstappen, who goes to the inside for the second part of Vale and will be ahead through Club. He goes to the inside of Russell, looking at it for for Farm and Abbey, as Isaac Hadjar starting to catch up with these guys. The provisional racer leaders have just had to manoeuvre their way through a group of cars. Hamilton done it effortlessly and has a brilliant opportunity to try and run away from the likes of Verstappen and Vettel while they can. Verstappen, however, looking to the inside and outside against George Russell, unable to get anywhere with it. Isaac Hadjar now tuning in at the back of the queue. Will he go for a move on his teammate and the Haas? He doesn't manage to do so as George Russell into the pits now. Oscar Piastri also in the pits, but Vettel has gone off and has got some floor damage for a lock-up in turn 16. Here's a proper view of it now. A very small mistake playing dividends in this race for the Haas. That lock-up granting him some floor damage in this race as Verstappen overtaking Oliver Behrman 3 seconds to Lewis Hamilton now. He will have to give it absolutely everything that he has got if he wants to beat that Racing Bulls today. But for Red Bull, Isaac Hadjar just behind Oliver Behrman as well, so they could try and cooperate and work their way up to the back of the Racing Bulls in this race, whilst Hamilton now cruises up to the rear end of Nico Rosberg. Will Rosberg give the place up that easily? Knowing him, he probably won't. as they work their way down to the Brooklands corner, and no move made there for Lewis Hamilton on Nico Rosberg. They had a ferocious rivalry at Mercedes, and it is being ignited in two different teams respectively, Racing Bulls and Ferrari, as they now progress up towards Stowe Corner. Hamilton on the inside of Rosberg. He will get ahead of Rosberg nice and easy, but Rosberg will not give up there. He looked to the inside, looked to the outside for Vale, just didn't find an opportunity to try and overtake in this race. Nico Rosberg, though, probably will not be too overly bothered, but for Lewis Hamilton, he will be very much fixated on trying to take the race lead and claiming enough points to take a lead in this Drivers' Championship, because with the way things are going, once Schumacher and Rosberg have both pitted, it will grant Lewis Hamilton about a 4-point championship lead over Max Verstappen before we go to Spa-Francorchamps tomorrow. But for Hamilton, he will just have to keep his composure. He's won so many titles, so has Verstappen. They both know what it takes to win it all. As Hamilton's so close to now getting the move done on Michael Schumacher. But could this be an ingenious one-stop strategy for that second Racing Bulls to give them both a prime opportunity in this race? Schumacher fending off Lewis Hamilton. He's not abiding to team orders this easily, so Hamilton's going to have to use DRS to the outside for Stowe. He will get ahead of Michael Schumacher, who stays out another lap, getting so close to that halfway distance in this race. And then if he was to put on those hard compounder tyres, he should be in a brilliant position to then progress and work himself up on that one-stop strategy. And we could see another duel near the end of this race. We've not actually had a main Grand Prix be determined by a final lap duel so far, because at Austria, once Verstappen got away, there was no catching up to him. He did only win by about 3 seconds though. Out in Austria, just wasn't challenged by the likes of Hamilton. Then a rough sprint race saw Schumacher take it into Stowe Corner on the final lap. And this race I do expect somewhat similar to the what determines the outcome of the race. However, Hamilton flying away whilst Verstappen and Hadjar not making much progress in this race. More than anything, Verstappen and Hadjar dropping and falling back compared to Lewis Hamilton, who now has a 5.8, practically 6-second advantage over this Red Bull, as Schumacher is fading and fading fast, and very much fading into the pit lane to make his stop. What tyre is it on? Rosberg's got hards out, and also Schumacher. They are doing exactly what I've just said. It's almost like they're listening to me. Put on hards and go to the end of this race. Draft yourself back in with the alternate strategy. But for Rosberg, he's in P19 and he's at the back of a mighty long queue that's being led from Oliver Behrman, who's somehow succumbed up to P10. He's yet to pit though. He will also be doing that strategy, pitting on to the hards, while Schumacher sits right behind, desperate to get the move done and promote that Racing Bulls up into P10. Does it in one foul swoop, and Alex Palou follows through with him as Oliver Behrman flies into the pit lane now. It will be Behrman, unfortunately, at the back of the pack here today, and by a fairly long distance, as that Mercedes is limping to the pit exit. Gabriel Bortoleto, who's had a rough race himself to say the least, has came out ahead of his teammate. So Bortoleto in P19, Behrman in P20, whilst the two Ferraris sit 17th and 18th in this race. Schumacher, his task though, is to hunt down Lando Norris, who is right behind Vettel and Prost. Prost doing wonders in the Alpine from where he was at the end of qualifying. It did not look like they had much hope whatsoever, and now they are definitely showing us what they have got here today. Vettel to the inside against Prost. That will grant the Haas driver back up into the top 7. Of course, he's suffering damage, which is not helping him one bit, as Vettel very near to pitting again, whilst Niki Lauda, Oscar Piastri and Nigel Mansell both running in the top 5 here today. Both drivers scoring some amazing points for the Sauber team, as Vettel now pit from 7th and drops down the field in the Haas, whilst Michael Schumacher all over the back end of Alex Palou. The Haas driver has ran away with the Racing Bulls, broke free of that queue. Antonelli sits in P11 with Paul Aron dueling away with him for that place. It's not like it's points on the line for either of them, but they know that they are fighting for the team's championship. The longer they can hold up, the likes of the McLarens, the Astons, gives them a bit more of a buffer to work with. A Schumacher to the inside for Vale against Alex Palou, gets away with it this time, but Schumacher has to look to the inside for Farm, as there could be a swap up the front. It's Verstappen versus Hadjar. Verstappen's got ahead of his teammate, as Red Bull hitting a civil war here today, whilst George Russell stuck behind Leclerc and Senna. Those hards on Rosberg not playing to much effect in this race, whereas for Schumacher, same story is being told. He's just being held up a bit by Alex Palou, whilst his teammate Lewis Hamilton is running away with it here today. Schumacher fighting through Vale against Palou, didn't manage to do anything with it. Now Paul Aron on the back of Schumacher very nearly, as we've just gone about halfway around lap 30 of 52 here today. So much time to still play around with. George Russell runs wide in turn 5. It's not much left in this race. As now Schumacher right behind Prost, who's just gone into the pit lane. The Alpine now taking their second stop in this race, as for some reason I just keep knocking my finger and swapping that telemetry tower between lead and that. So I am sorry about it. I'm going to start using the arrows. Hopefully that won't do any harm. But Verstappen starting to drop back from Isaac Hadjar, the Red Bull, set to try and take some revenge in this race against the Racing Bulls team. That gap slowly dropping down for Hadjar's Nigel Mansell into the pit lane. He's pulling his second stop. Alex Palou also in the pit lane. A Schumacher sets your fastest lap. It's a 1:30.791. The Racing Bulls starting to look rather competitive. As you can see, that margin has also started to drop to the likes of Hamilton. But with the way things are going, if Hamilton was to pit now, my calculations should put him right with Michael Schumacher in this race. So it may be a no-brainer for the Racing Bulls driver to manage those tyres to the end, as Hadjar and Verstappen double stacking
at Red Bull. Have they built enough of a margin to double stack? No, they haven't. So Verstappen, the championship leader entering the main race, has got held up, and it's going to forfeit him big time here. As Hadjar comes out ahead of the queue, Verstappen comes out in amongst the queue. In fact, at the back of it, with Russell, Leclerc, Rosberg, Senna and Antonelli to all work their way by as Senna promotes himself up into what is P8 for the time being. Verstappen will not be enjoying this whatsoever, as it has all gone quite terribly wrong for them. But Hadjar about 6 seconds back from Schumacher. So Hamilton should still be about 3 seconds ahead of Schumacher in this race when he chooses to pit from your race lead. He's got a 17-second gap over Oscar Piastri. It is rather comfortable for him. As Piastri in second, he's got Norris tucked in behind, who's fighting Niki Lauda for track position here today. Niki Lauda opening that rear wing, he's closing in, doesn't close in enough to go for a move. He did glance to the inside, didn't make it work. Piastri into the pit. The Sauber, also Paul Aaron, Senna and Russell all pitting as well, so that saves Verstappen a bit of work, but he is just fading out of the contention of this race to a point where Oscar Piastri has overcut the Red Bull. He was stuck in so much traffic. Piastri's managed to get ahead, and the gap to his teammate is about 12 seconds in this race. It's all going horrendously wrong for Max Verstappen. He will not be enjoying this race whatsoever, as he's stuck behind Charles Leclerc. He looked to the inside, looked to the outside, he looked everywhere he could, but no door opened. So now towards the corner, Mansell round the outside. He's got, I believe, a bit fresher tyres, so he will just get ahead of Verstappen. He will fight it through club though. He does not want to hinder any places whatsoever, but will have to eventually yield against the Sauber. It's Nigel Mansell up to P9, Oscar Piastri in P7. Sauber having an amazing race as Mansell in first attempt straight up past Charles Leclerc. Nothing that he could do about it. Whereas Verstappen still stuck behind Charles. Sebastian Vettel even having go against Verstappen now, but Verstappen has finally got that Red Bull ahead of the man he was stuck behind for a fair while. Sebastian Vettel even overtaking the Alpine as well. Niki Lauda limping down the pits. Where does he come out compared to Mansell and Verstappen? Behind them both, and just behind Sebastian Vettel in this race. Fastest lap goes to George Russell in the Scuderia Ferrari. So the race is very much on here today. Schumacher in fourth. Hamilton has pitted by my understanding and is on fresh softs. He's 5 seconds behind Schumacher. Hadjar's just ahead of Schumacher and 4 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. So the question will be, over the next 15 laps, could Hadjar pose a threat to Lewis Hamilton and reverse what was done in the sprint race, whilst his teammate Verstappen duels away with Nigel Mansell for P7 on the road, which is a very disappointing outcome from Verstappen's perspective using the DRS. It's been a weekend to forget, and there's even more to forget for him, as he doesn't manage to get past Mansell at the first time of asking. Looks to the outside for Copse Corner, just didn't have anywhere to go. But Schumacher right behind Lando Norris. Could it be both Racing Bulls on the podium? Norris will most likely be in the pits in the next lap or so, and will try and go for a recovery drive in that final stint. Charles Leclerc limping down the pit lane here today. Schumacher to the inside against Norris, and that is the Racing Bulls up to P3. But Isaac Hadjar 5 seconds off of Lewis Hamilton. The Racing Bulls absolutely flying, as it seems like they cannot be matched here today. A bit like how Red Bull had how no one had a reply to Red Bull in Austria. Nobody has a reply to the Racing Bulls at Silverstone. Hamilton at 29.5, fastest lap of the event here today. Nothing is stopping the Brit, who's about to take home another race win on home soil, which I can guarantee you he will love for his championship bids. It is such a big moment in their championship fight, whilst Oliver Bearman just being overtaken by George Russell there. Hamilton will have a monumental championship lead entering Spa-Francorchamps. It's only been 2 races, but that lead will be double digits, as it's 1 point between Verstappen and Hamilton entering this race. Verstappen, though, is yielding about 17 points, so Hamilton will have a championship advantage to fight against, as Lauda has had a moment. He's parked the car and gets back underway after spinning turn 3. We will have a proper look at it. For the McLaren, just spins on the exit. A very easy mistake to make, and that is why he is down in P16. But for Nico Hülkenberg in the other McLaren, could he try and salvage a point for the McLaren team here today? He's tucked right in behind Alex Palou as they go through Maggers and Beckers. He will open up that rear wing to try and get an extra spurt of top speed. Round the outside, doesn't manage to do so. But Verstappen to the inside through club against Nico Rosberg. He'll go to the inside for Farm and gets that Red Bull back up into the top 6 of this race. He could definitely salvage a top 5 with Lando Norris, who is still either waiting to pit or just burning that tyre down to its very last wit, who is in P5 and is just going so insanely slow. It must be painful for that Aston Martin. He was second a few laps ago. He's now about 18 seconds off of Hadjar in this race, as Verstappen to the inside gets ahead of Oscar Piastri, who will not Piastri, Russell, who has now just got a puncture. He's gone past the pit lane and grabs a puncture on his tour over the line. So now Alex Palou and Vettel and everyone else getting past the Aston Martin. It was last place after retiring on the opening lap at Austria, and now a puncture to add salt to the wounds so far, as he now drops behind Gabriel Bortoleto and almost certainly will get lapped come the end of this lap for Lando Norris. It has been a season to forget in the British Racing Green, but for Haas there may be a little glimmer of hope. Oscar Piastri, though, will or should take second in this championship after this race. Not second, third in this championship after the race, which will be beneficial for Sauber, whilst Mansell also taking home a rather healthy points tally for his team as well. And Nico Hülkenberg, as things stand, will take a point for McLaren, which he cannot go away without a smile about, as Vettel did try overtaking Alex Palou, but Palou doing everything he needs to do, while Paul Aron round the outside of Hülkenberg. He's got ahead of the Papaya, and the Papaya will have to plan to try and get back ahead with such little time left. But Nico Rosberg, even trying to get a move done, against Nigel Mansell. It didn't work into Brooklands. He'll look at it for Cobb's Corner. It doesn't work there either. So we wait for another lap to go by, but Rosberg all over the back of the Sauber will use DRS to the inside for Stowe, and that's Nico Rosberg up ahead of the Brit. But Mansell said it's not done there, and it will be done when he says so. But Paul Aaron, fastest lap of the race so far, sitting in P10 in that Williams, will take home his first points of the season and contributes to Williams' effort at holding on in this championship against Aston Martin, who have had a rather slow start to the season. So have Alpine. So Williams giving themselves that early upper hand, which not many would have thought would have came their way, as Senna tucked in right behind Nico Hülkenberg. Surely he's going to use the influence of DRS to go to the inside. He looked to the inside, glanced, and tried making a lunge. Didn't have enough space in the end. Whereas lap 47, Nigel Mansell may now have another opportunity at Nico Rosberg to get the place back. Looks to the inside for Brooklands. Doesn't go for the lunge. It's just so many drivers waiting on the opportunity, to a point where there's not many opportunities left. But for Paul Aaron, there could definitely be an opportunity for him to progress that Williams 2 extra places up. A yellow flag being waved. I believe that's a crash. Yes, it is. Who's it between? It's Alan Prost and Andrea Kimi Antonelli up towards Stowe Corner. Prost on the inside. Antonelli makes contact on the outside. Both cars go for a little spin on the exit of the corner. Such a shame, but Vettel and Palou giving us a great inter-team battle for P8 here today. So little left to do, but a collision caused for Antonelli grants him a penalty. He's 15th, so that won't impact the final outcome of today's race. Sebastian Vettel in P9, Alex Palou in P8. Will we see the Haas go for another swap in this race? But Senna tucked in P10. He's in prime position to snatch a point from Williams here today. Senna, he scored 3 in the sprint race. He's looking for another 3. Well, not another 3, up to another 4 to take home. Come the end of the race, there's only 3 laps to go, plus 1, so 4 laps. Ignore my maths, but Lewis Hamilton is heading up towards Stowe Corner to start his 50th lap of the event. We are so close, yet so far, to crowning the British Grand Prix winner, as Vettel gets past Palou into Copse Corner. The Haas driver really is having a tough time at the team, fighting his teammate over minimal points, but Palou will barge his way back ahead of the German. But 3 laps to go for these guys. Will the opportunity fade away? Lando Norris has snatched fastest lap, if you didn't notice, and he is pulling Hamilton around the circuit. But Paul Aaron still tucked in the back of this train. He's sitting and clinging on to that very final point in this race, which will make it 15 drivers with, no, not even 15, in fact 16 drivers with a point after the first 2 events. It'd just be Oliver Behrman, Nico Hülkenberg, Alan Prost and Lando Norris to be waiting on one, as George Russell has just overtaken Senna and fighting Paul Aaron round the outside of the final corner. Didn't make it work as it's all kicking off. You even have Nico Hülkenberg and Niki Lauda right behind him. This could be a massive fight to round off the second event of the season. Niki Lauda looked to try and overtake his teammate, but where 2 teammates lead this train, 2 teammates also round off the train, as Hamilton has started his final lap of this race. He has got about 13 more corners to master and finesse in order to crown himself British Grand Prix winner here in the CRL F1 Manager Season 1. Alex Palou, however, overtaking Vettel again, and Russell has now got the move done on Paul Aron. Senna even trying to do it on the young Estonian. But Niki Lauda versus Nico Hülkenberg. Lauda's ahead of his teammates, as I will see whether or not there is a move. There won't be. So we tune in with Hamilton, who rounds the final corner. It was Schumacher who won the sprint. Hamilton wins the main event. He gets gold at Silverstone, and it will be him who leads the Drivers' Championship by 11 points, entering Spa as Rosberg wheel-to-wheel with Nigel Mansell for P6. Rosberg gets ahead. That's healthy points for Ferrari, as George Russell has also stolen that last point from Paul Aron with a move entering the final lap. Williams so close to scoring a point, but only a quarter of a second denies it from him, as Lando Norris has DNF'd, ran out of fuel before making that finish line. As one more race done, it's Lewis Hamilton who wins, followed by Isaac Hadjar in second, Oscar Piastri third, Michael Schumacher fourth, Max in fifth, Nico Rosberg sixth, Nigel Mansell seventh, Alex Palou in eighth, Sebastian Vettel ninth, George Russell takes home 10th, Paul Aron finishes 11th, Ayrton Senna 12th, Niki Lauda 13th, Nico Hülkenberg in 14th, Charles Leclerc 15th, Oliver Behrman in 16th, with Adam Prost 17th, Andrea Kimi Antonelli 18th. Then it's Gabriel Bortoleto, last of the finishers, in 19th, and Lando Norris finishing in P20 with the fastest lap. In terms of the Drivers' Championship, it'll be Lewis Hamilton who has a 15-point advantage over Max Verstappen after the British GP. 31 points in the bag for him. Then it's Verstappen second by about 7 points over Oscar Piastri, who sits in third. Isaac Hadjar holds fourth place. Sebastian Vettel fifth. Michael Schumacher in sixth, with George Russell seventh. Niki Lauda eighth. Nigel Mansell in ninth, and Nico Rosberg 10th. Antonelli 11th. Palou 12th. Senna 13th. Bortoleto 14th. Leclerc 15th. Paul Aron 16th. Hülkenberg 17th. Behrman 18th. Prost 19th, and Lando Norris still in P20. For the constructors though, Racing Bulls has a 10-point lead over Red Bull, who have a fairly healthy margin over Kick Sauber, who's third, Haas in fourth, Ferrari fifth, McLaren sixth, Williams seventh, Aston Martin eighth, Mercedes ninth, and Alpine rounding things off in P10. But for now, that will be me, and I will see you all tomorrow for the F1 Manager at Spa-Francorchamps. Goodbye.